I'm Kendra Prospero, the host of How I Turned the Corner. I'm here today live at the Rocky Mountain Total Rewards Conference, bringing you some of the thought leaders who are here. Sometimes leaders need proof that culture will drive the bottom line, and the proof can come from data. It comes from other places as well, but data is helpful. Our guest has all the data needed to show that a focus on the people will drive bottom line results. Dr. Michelle Corman is an employee research leader for Mercer, helping organizations use data and research to truly understand their people and shape strategies that drive positive change. At the heart of her work is the belief that research isn't just numbers. It's a way to give leaders the data needed to drive profitability. Michelle, welcome to How I Turn the Corner.
Thank you very much, Kendra.
I'm so glad you are here. So I would love for us to just get a little bit more of your background as we kind of go into this topic. So can you just share with the audience a little bit more about you and your background, how you got into this?
Happy to. So at Mercer, I help my clients answer their burning questions about their workforce. Questions like, do our employees feel valued? Do our employees value their rewards package? Are there elements that they don't really value that we could swap for something else instead? We also help answer questions like, how aligned is our C-suite with the vision of the organization? And do they bring different points of view to continuously challenge each other to enable their organization to go to the next level? And as you mentioned, there is a connection between all of these things and the bottom line, right? So when we think about employees and employee satisfaction, there is never a scenario where an unhappy employee is going to work their hardest.
Right.
Never.
Totally.
Right? What happens is they get in this situation where they're working just hard enough that they don't get fired.
Right.
Right? And when this is a collective feeling and sentiment, we see it. Right? We feel it, and there's an impact to the bottom line.
For sure, yeah. I say this all the time. Who benefits from an unhappy employee? I mean, customers don't benefit. We know that because we will leave a brand or we'll leave an organization when we've had bad customer service, we've had a bad situation. Employees definitely don't benefit in terms of being, collaborative and teaming together when someone hates their job. Those people are not easy to manage at all either. And then of course that in particular individual is certainly not winning when they hate their job, because deep down they know that they're giving up the best hours of their day, right? And the best years of their lives for something, and they hate it. It's draining. It's a very, catabolic experience for them. And so I don't think anybody wins when someone hates a job.
That's right. And to take it a step even further, they're not only having a bad experience at work, we don't shut ourselves off when we leave work to go home. Right? There's this notion of spillover where we're taking these stress home with us, and it's affecting us around the clock.
Yeah.
So it's not good for anyone.
No, and as we know too, research has shown that when you have that cortisol dump, or you have even a slow stream of cortisol in your system, it hangs out in our bodies for at least 26 hours if you haven't found a way to flush it out, right? And so of course it doesn't benefit our families and our neighbors. And so I think you're absolutely right. And now let's take this back then to how do we convince leaders that it is so important for them to create this environment where their employees are happy. How do you do this with data? Tell us, please.
The step one is talking about the cost of turnover.
Okay, yes.
Right, because there's a direct connection between turnover and bottom line.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I've seen stats that show that it can cost 3 times an employee's salary to replace them. Right?
Right. It depends on how long you keep them too, if they're a bad fit, right? But yes.
Exactly.
Perfect. So turnover, expensive. We start with the data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a challenge we're facing is organizations are in a place right now where they're in cost containment mode, right? Because of market volatility and inflation. So the challenge is CFOs are going in and saying, what can we eliminate, right? Where can we cut back? And unfortunately, a lot of employee listening lands on that list, on that chopping block, right? So I'm seeing some organizations say, you know what, we're not going to do an engagement survey this year. But the challenge is that the engagement survey actually gives insight into what employees' biggest pain points are so that these things can be resolved and productivity can be increased. So sometimes these pain points center around operational inefficiencies, right? Or challenges with teamwork.
Or technology, or, right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought up technology because a lot of organizations are also investing more in technology solutions. So having insight into how that technology rollout is going, where the bumps in the road are, and so on, enable organizations to streamline and have a more efficient use of their technology.
So tell us, we talked the other day, and it was a great conversation about some of the pieces of data that you're looking for, and then where you've been looking a little bit for the gaps. Can you share a little bit with what you do, especially at Mercer, to help uncover some of these areas for opportunity with the leadership team?
Yeah, happy to. So some of these gaps we look at from the 10,000 foot view, right? So when it comes to the total rewards that we're offering, what do employees truly value and where are those gaps? And the win-win scenario is when we identify that the organization is investing a bunch of money over here in this reward that employees don't really value,
right,
but they'd rather have this instead, and the win-win is if this is actually more cost effective, right? Another place I look for gaps are in the roles that the leaders bring to the table, right? So there are different types of roles that a leader can naturally assume, that all of us will naturally assume in the workplace, right? Are we results focused? Are we pragmatists in that we're keen on where things may go awry? Are we innovators? Are we dreamers? Are we focused on processes? And are we focused on relationships? Those are the 5 main gaps. And one of the things I'll assess is on a C-suite team, who's filling which roles? And what is the composition of these roles being filled? Do we have a disproportionate number of pragmatists? If so, what that means is that ideas are being kind of squashed before they're even brought to fruition,
right,
because we're focused too much on why it won't work.
Right.
And where I often see gaps too is on that relationship focus.
Yes, always. It seems like it's always the last, I would imagine, is the one that's the most underutilized.
It is.
Or underdiscovered, yeah.
It is. And the question I have is why, right? And I think it's what gets rewarded, right? And as we're climbing the ranks, having a keen focus on bottom line issues, focusing on innovation and driving the organization forward, these are the kinds of behaviors that are rewarded with promotions and so on. It's the relationships one that there isn't as clear of a connection to the bottom line.
Right. Even though there is, you and I know there is a very clear connection to
Absolutely.
the bottom line. It just takes maybe a couple more steps to truly measure it. Because you're going to measure the turnover rate, which a lot of people will say is just the cost of doing business. I'm like, well, that's an expensive cost. Productivity is another one for sure. If you can get more productivity out of people, that's going to impact the bottom line because you might not need as many people to hire. You might even be able to form more efficient teams. You've also then got, in general, although I think there's a bit of a trap, when you have less attrition or you have less turnover, you then will hopefully have more innovation as well. Because you've got people now working together, they're more trusting with each other, and there's going to tend to be a little bit more innovation. Not always, but I think there can be.
I agree.
Yeah.
And another thing, or another connecting point here, is employees can be our biggest brand ambassadors, right? They're out there talking to their friends and their family about the things that are front of mind for them. And if what's front of mind for them is how great their job is,
yes.
right? What does that do?
Right, exactly.
That's free marketing.
Yeah. And well, that makes then hiring faster when there's a need when there's growth then too. It makes it easier to hire because you've got these ambassadors out there selling the culture of the company. Yeah.
Exactly.
So within these categories, and knowing that most of the leadership teams, are lacking on the relationship side, this makes the role of human resources even that much more important, because somebody needs to be thinking about the people and what they need and how they can be more productive, how we can reduce turnover. So can you just talk about what you're seeing maybe in that trend? Are you seeing more and more C-suites inviting and having a chief human resource officer at the table, representing that function of the relationship side of what is needed for leadership?
Yes. So years ago, I was often seeing HR reporting into legal or into finance. So
Crazy.
the head of HR did not have a seat at the C-suite table.
Right.
And I'm seeing a transition now where there is this role, this chief HR officer role that brings this people perspective to the table. And I think it's critically important that organizations think about that. And that's a clear one, right? Do you have someone from HR sitting at the big table?
That
The
you
answer is
respect.
no. Exactly.
Yeah.
That you value as much as the other chiefs sitting around
Right.
the table.
Yeah. But if the answer is no, I interrupted you. If the answer is no, then what's the opportunity?
The opportunity is to show with data where these gaps are, and to show what high-performing organizations are doing. And what these high-performing organizations are doing is they're focusing on their customer, they're focusing on their processes, and they're focusing on their people.
For sure. So I see that post-COVID, so many people basically kind of threw up their hands and said, I am no longer going to work for a company that does not treat me well. And we saw this, in 2021, we saw the Great Resignation, right? This mass exodus that happened of people moving around and saying, I won't work for that anymore. I want to work for someone who cares for me. That care comes from an HR function generally. Now, there's some leaders who, again, will have more of that bend toward, caring for people. And then they ended up with this kind of cream of the crop of the people that were now a part of their teams, because there was this mutual picking of each other, right? The employees were like, I want to work for that company, and the companies were interviewing those folks and saying, we want you to work here. And don't you think we've also seen now a spike in innovation since those days? And even though we don't have a lot of runway, but in the last 3 to 4 years, it's been incredible to see what has come out of just innovation and what's happening in a lot of organizations right now. And I point that back to that time frame of the Great Resignation. I mean, what do you think of that when I say that?
I agree. So I totally agree. The challenge is how things shift when the job market heats or cools.
For sure.
Right? So when it's a hot job market, we see a lot of that innovation coming out, right? As organizations are really searching for that top talent. The challenge is when the job market cools, organizations have to keep that focus, and while they may not be actively recruiting for these roles, the important thing is that we're watering our grass, right? So that it doesn't turn brown.
Yeah.
And so we do that through continuing to focus on our most valuable asset, which is our people.
Yeah. So you mentioned a bit at the beginning that the employee engagement surveys are starting to get cut, during this time when things are maybe slowing down a little bit, seen as a little bit less essential. Are there other ways that an organization can still be gathering this data without needing to spend a lot of money on an employee engagement survey?
Yeah. So there are new tools out there. I think AI is really cool, by the way, for what that's worth. And I've seen new tools out there that organizations are able to buy at a lower price point to get a finger on their pulse of how their workforce is doing. And an example of one of these tools is I'm not going to name the tool, I'll just describe it. But what it does is it scours the internet for what employees are saying about the company. So think websites like Glassdoor and things like this. It shows what employees are saying and what customers are saying, and it runs these algorithms to give scores in various areas that leadership can see where the gaps are.
Okay.
Right? Is it around recognition? Is it around pay? Or is it
career
something
growth?
else?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And those are typically the top ones.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, I did a linkage analysis for a healthcare network that we were looking at what predicts turnover, actual turnover. And we took an engagement survey from the year before. And on my side, I was able to link it up to a turnover file that showed the isolated individuals who were still with the company and those who had left the company, and we looked to see what was most predictive of that turnover, like actual turnover,
right.
Not intent to stay. And we found the number one predictor was recognition from management when employees did a good job.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And the amazing thing about that is how much does it cost to tell somebody they did a good job?
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. It drives me crazy. I'll talk to leaders and they'll say things like, well, why should I thank them for doing their job? And I'm like, why not? Good heavens, it's 2 words. Thank you. Even if what they produced wasn't perfect. Thank you. And we need to fix this one thing. And, we forgot this one little area, and whatever, right? But
right.
Please just thank people for doing their job. Yes.
Right.
It's a nice thing. And I read a study recently that ties into neuroscience around this. So I don't know, I didn't go validate if this is a total truth story, but it makes sense to me, which is that when you give financial recognition, it's a dopamine hit for people. So it's a temporary experience for them. Dopamine is, one of those hormones now that we even know isn't actually that great for us, right? We need to counteract it, balance it out. But when you give a verbal thank you, or you recognize someone in a more broad way, or you recognize them in a more heartfelt way, it's a serotonin hit. Serotonin lasts and that makes us feel better, right? It keeps us around for longer than just the dopamine hit. And so I love that what you just said is that the recognition is the most important thing. And to the listeners, you don't have to spend money to recognize either, right?
Exactly.
So I know that's a little counter to this whole conference in terms of total rewards, right? But sometimes a thank you is enough.
Exactly, and it makes us feel valued and appreciated. And something you said just now really stood out to me, and that said it may not have been perfect. And I think that perfect should never be the bar, because an interesting thing about humans is we're hardwired to make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's what we do. That's why we accept a margin of error in statistics. It's because of the human factor that comes into it that's predisposed to making errors. But it's all in how we look at those mistakes, right? So I personally like to look at mistakes as an opportunity to identify what went wrong, how it went wrong, and how can we improve whatever we're doing to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and how to make it better. Exactly. Yeah, no, I'm with you on that completely. And again, there's a lot of neuroscience behind the power of that, and that when what we know is that when someone takes a perspective of being negative about something bad happening, going to feel like a victim or being angry about it or frustrated or despondent, any of those feelings, we know that the hormones that flood our system are the catabolic hormones, the hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Those are hormones that are necessary in certain situations, but not all situations. Where we also know that when someone can not think that way and actually say, oh, what's the opportunity with this loss, this change? That actually floods our system with these hormones that are more positive and more anabolic, right? The ones that build us up, that are rejuvenating. And so we even know from a neuroscience perspective that it is better, and yet we sometimes don't often respond that way. So, yeah. So let me then kind of conclude our time here together. What are some trends that you are seeing right now in total compensation and rewards that you think will help with this conversation, and especially help leaders see what they can do to really support their people and the relationships inside their companies?
Yeah, I think what's really important is understanding that the employee voice and the bottom line are not necessarily separate things, right? And when it comes to compensation and rewards, having a solid understanding of how employees are experiencing their rewards is so critical in designing the next wave, or preparing for the next open enrollment cycle.
Okay, excellent. That's great. Well, gosh, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today on How I Turn the Corner. This has been amazing.
Thanks
I
for
really
having me, Kendra.
appreciate your time. So, all right, for everyone who's listening, thank you so much for joining us. And we have more interviews coming, so please continue to listen in, and we will see you soon. Thanks so much.